The European Union foreign policy chief has accused Israel of funding Hamas. Joseph Borrell alleged that Israel supported the militant group to weaken the more moderate Palestinian Authority. In the past, Israel's prime minister has denied similar allegations. Hamas is designated a terrorist organization by multiple countries. Borrell did not offer any kind of proof or expand more on his statements, which he made at a university in Spain.
We believe that a two-state solution imposed from the outside can bring peace. And I have to insist that although Israel denies it, they themselves have created Hamas. And yes, Hamas has been financed by the Israeli government to try to weaken the Palestinian Authority. But if we don't intervene forcefully, the spiral of hatred and violence will continue from generation to generation and from funeral to funeral. And the seeds of hatred that are being sown in Gaza today will flourish.
Let's talk more about this with Jackperk, our Brussels correspondent. He joins us now from there. Jack, what can you tell us about the comments made by Borrell at this Spanish university? And do you believe he's speaking in his role as EU foreign policy chief there?
Yeah, that's really the big question, Gerhard. I mean, you can see from his outfit that he's not really dressed in the way we'd ordinarily see him delivering press conferences in a suit and tie. He was there at the University of Valladolid, dressed up in this sort of, ceremonial garb to speak to the students, and delivered this blistering speech against the Israeli government and specifically against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, where he accused the Prime Minister of funding Hamas, indeed of basically trying to derail the two-state solution that the EU favours for the last 30 years. Now, we sort of know that these are Joseph Borrell's own personal positions on this issue. He's a Spanish socialist who were generally perceived, that political group in Spain, to be more pro-Palestine than other political entities in the European Union. But when you become the EU foreign policy chief, you take on the role that is the speaking for the European Union. And you do that pretty much in whatever context you're speaking in. So a lot of these comments that he's made will not be going down very well in Israel. And we also know that here in Brussels, we've had word from some of his advisors that actually perhaps some of these things that he said were not necessarily lines that were approved in the institutions of the European Union. Joseph Borrell is 79 years old. He's a veteran politician, and he's probably only got about 5 months left here in his job in the European Union. So he's potentially speaking for himself in this instance. But when he speaks for himself, because of the position he holds, it has a lot of weight and a lot of attention is put on that as the EU's foreign policy chief.
Our correspondent Jackperk in Brussels there. Thank you very much. Let's go on and speak to Yakob Schindler. He's the Senior Director of the Counter-Extremism Project and joins us from New York. Now, what do you think of the European Union's foreign policy chief's allegation that Hamas was created and funded by Israel?
Well, I mean, first of all, I do not think that this is the official position of the EU, and I think he's going to have a bit of explanation to do because he conflates a couple of things. Clearly, there's been some measure of divide and rule going on by the Israeli government since Hamas was created, because it was seen as an alternative in 1988 to the PLO, which at that time still denied the existence of Israel as well. So it was essentially seen as a competition of two guys who both wanted to destroy Israel. Now, subsequently, in the early 90s, the PLO became the PNA after the Oslo Accords and actually recognized the existence of Israel. Now, what he left out in all of this narrative is, of course, that since Hamas was in exclusive control in Gaza after 2007, they won the election in 2006, threw out Fatah by force and weapons in 2007, Israel has attacked Gaza and Hamas pretty much every single year. The last attack on Gaza and Hamas positions before October 7 was in May 2023. So this kind of belies these narratives that Hamas was a convenient ally for the Israeli government or even for Mr. Netanyahu in order to weaken the PNA. There was an element of that, but Israel very sustainably has fought the terroristic aspects of Hamas from the get-go.
Now, if that happened in one way or another, how did money destined for the Palestinian militant group Hamas actually get into Gaza?
Well, there is the unofficial and then there's the official money. So the unofficial money that Hamas collected and got from state supporters, Iran especially, but also to a certain extent donations from Qatar, that went in various ways with cash being transported, cash floated from ships, but also money exchange houses, several of which had been designated by the US authorities as well as the Israeli authorities over the years. And then there was the official money. So any humanitarian aid money, there is no banking relationship between Gaza and anywhere else in the world. Any official aid money, whether it's from the European Union, from Israel, or from the United States, had to go first and foremost to the Israeli banking system, was then cashed out by Israeli officials and transported into Gaza. So in that aspect, Mr. Borrell is right. Israel did hand over money to Gaza, to Hamas in Gaza, but it did so on behalf of humanitarian organizations and governments that wanted to help Gaza. And according to the Oslo Accord, Israel is collecting taxes for the Palestinian national authorities, and that means tax money that went to Gaza and tax money that went to the Palestinian National Authority in the West Bank. So again, Israel paid the money, but it was part of the agreement that it did so.
Now, why do you think Borrell said this, and why now?
I think there's an increasing frustration with Mr. Borrell in particular, and your correspondent outlined his political background, with the inability of finding a solution for the day after in Gaza. What we are seeing right now is that Israel, with its military operations, is buying itself time. The destruction of the physical infrastructure, the elimination, arrest of fighters, the destruction of the arms and rockets and ammunition dumps is all things that can be retrained, replaced if there is no sustainable solution in Gaza. And so far, there has not really been a serious plan on what happens once the Hamas infrastructure in Gaza is eliminated and what happens in the long run with the Palestinians, because a sustainable solution for Gaza is unlikely to be enough to prevent another extremist movement, whether it's called itself Hamas or any other name, from emerging again. And Israel, in particular the Israeli government, has been very, very hesitant, also for internal government reasons, because there are extremely right-wing parties in this government that Mr. Netanyahu has to placate if he doesn't want his government to collapse, to address that issue of what happens afterwards with Gaza and what happens with the Palestinians. Nevertheless, I don't think a two-state solution forced upon both parties from the outside is necessarily the most sustainable solution here.
Jakob Schindler there from the Counter-Extremism Project. Thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us.